Well, we'll keep our eye on that one. Moving on to the Kings, just when we thought that the entire thing needed to be scrapped, they have rattled off 7 straight wins. Some of those wins are over the Mavs, Grizzlies, Warriors, Celtics. Obviously, we know they fired Mike Brown. They put Doug Christie in charge of things. Normally you win that first game out after firing a coach. Like, that's sort of the mandatory sports rule. 7, though, Lou? Like, is this all that needed to happen?
Yeah, you got a team that's bought in. They've bought into Doug Christie, and they needed a new voice. They needed new leadership, and they're showing it. Obviously, whatever was going on between Mike Brown and his locker room, it didn't translate to winning basketball. And now that these guys are rolling, whether it's Doug Christie or these guys relieved to be going in a different direction, it's working. It's working. They're being the Sacramento Kings team that we thought that they were. They've always had enough talent. So that's what made it so confusing why they were in this rut. Like, why are they not winning games? Why are they not getting over the hump? Because, talent-wise, they're a good enough team. So now looking at it, it's hard to not say that this isn't a leadership thing. So sometimes it's good to get a fresh voice in there, good to get a fresh opportunity for somebody else to say, hey, look, we're going to go in this direction, or we're going to play this style of basketball that's different from what we've been doing, and let's see if this work out. And it's worked with Doug Christie even down to the point where he took the team up to the rooftop of the arena so they could see the beam. They can see, what the impact that they're having on the city. Sometimes these things are kind of laughed at, it like, come on, coach, we're grown men and, we get it. We're out here competing at a high level. But also on the flip side of that coin, sometimes this works and it motivates guys to get going. And it looked like this has been a situation in Sacramento. So this is something to look out for with Doug Christie, if he'll be able to get that interim tag off of his name and possibly get this job, if that's something that the organization and the players want as a whole.
Yeah, and one of those wins was against the Boston Celtics, like you said, Michelle, and it was an ass whooping. And that was with a fully loaded Celtics team with no De'Aaron Fox, where Sabonis had like 23 and 28. They were flying around. And I always say this, when a coach is fired, especially a guy with the pedigree of Mike Brown, it then falls a lot on the players, right? And you're going to respond one way. You're going to fracture, and you're going to kind of, blame it on the distraction of the coach being fired, and it was the dumpster fire of a situation and we can't get out of it. Or you're going to rally together, you're going to compete, and you're going to kind of transition that to winning games. And they've responded with wins. And whether that is because Doug Christie's this great coach, or is it just a fresh change? A lot of times guys just need a fresh change of a system, of leadership, of a coach. Like the Cleveland Cavs is J.B. Bickerstaff the worst the coach in the world? No, look what he's doing in Detroit, but also look what a fresh face Kenny Atkinson's doing in Cleveland, who's arguably runaway coach of the year. So sometimes you do just need that kind of change of leadership, and it gets players to at least compete. Then once you're competing and you're on the same page and you're bought into this new coach's philosophies and system and rotation, and you trust them, that's when you start winning games, and that's when you start having fun. That's what the Sacramento Kings are doing right now. And you got to give Doug Christie credit, but I don't think this is like Mike Brown was such a bad coach that now they're just playing better without him. This falls on the players a lot when something like this happens, and they've capitalized.
So what it is, Chandler? It's just understanding the personality of your team, right? Like, we know that Mike Brown is a great coach. We've seen the things that he's able to accomplish, but that doesn't mean that voice is the right one for this particular locker room. Sometimes coaches, they rule by iron fist. Sometimes coaches, they rule by being a motivator. They rule by talking to their players in a certain way. Maybe the communication level that Mike Brown was trying to get this team to get to, what he's accustomed to in a Golden State, where, you can kind of be tougher, or you can kind of rule with an iron fist with this locker room. And possibly it just didn't work for this locker room. This might be a locker room of guys that need to be motivated. They need to be confident, and you need to exude that confidence out of them, opposed to, my way or the highway. Sometimes that's the only issue. It doesn't come down to whether you know your stuff as a basketball coach. A lot of this comes down to being able to be on the same page of communication with your team, same page of communication with your guys, understanding their personalities, and seeing how you can get the best out of those guys in that locker room. And it looked like that was just the issue with these guys and Mike Brown.
Yeah, and last thing before we move on here, it's true. The vibe with your coach, it's not like guys are going to try and play bad or miss shots or try and lose games if they don't like the coach. But you hear this saying, like, I'll run through a wall for that guy. They weren't going to run through a wall for Mike Brown. I wasn't going to run through a wall for Lloyd Pierce in Atlanta. I couldn't stand the dude. Like, I just thought, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm just saying.
Just
there are,
mention that. Yep.
there are certain situations where you just simply don't like the dude, don't trust the guy, feel like you're not getting a fair shot, where that impacts the team, and that becomes a distraction. Maybe that's not even the player's fault. Maybe that's not even the coach's fault. But there's always situations like this where this happens, and this seems to be the case with the Kings.
The vibe, it really is just as simple as like a vibe. I know we use vibes a lot, but it seems to be that's what it was. We talk a lot about De'Aaron Fox, and you mentioned Sabonis, so we want to focus on that as well, because in this 7-game win streak that they are currently on, those are his numbers, by the way. He's averaging 20, 17, and 7. The Celtics game was huge, 23 and 28, like you said, without Fox on that floor. We see what they do with Jokic in Denver. Is there a world, Chandler, in which maybe they should do that in Sacramento through Sabonis?
I mean, listen, he's an absolute stud, and he's always going to put up numbers. He's a walking double-double, and he's a great dude. You want this guy on your team. Now, I don't know if you can win a championship with this guy's the number one guy. I just think with the game shooting threes, guys stepping out hasn't done him any favors necessarily. But like I said, he is an absolute monster on the glass. He's unselfish. You can play through him. He's a smart dude. He's a tough guy. So I do love him. I want him on my team. Now, if he's the number one, I need a really good number 2 and 3. But he is the type of player that you can play through. He can hit him. You can play pick and roll with him. You can put him on the elbow and kind of let him pass the ball and facilitate. So he is a hell of a player. I still think Fox is their best player and putting up their best numbers. But you look at these numbers, 17 rebounds a game. The one game he had 28 rebounds was nuts. He's a walking double-double, and he's always going to be productive. I just don't know if you can win with him as the number one guy. If you do, you really got to put a great 2 and 3 around him, in my opinion.
All right, Lou, all-star time. He's a 3-time all-star. I know what their record is. De'Aaron Fox will probably be there. Does he get his 4th? Is there a world in which they get a couple?
It's going to be difficult. I think he may be late to the party, and this is where the water gets muddy, right? When individual accolades and team wins kind of go hand in hand, and you have to factor those things in. Them sitting at a 9 seed in All-Star Weekend, being about 3 to 4 weeks away from us right now, I just think he's late to the party. You're going to have a lot of guys that's put in a great body of work, and that's translated into their teams being successful. And I don't know if they get a look with 2 guys at the 9th seed. Now, if they go on a run here and they can get in that top 6, they can get in that top 5 or somewhere in there with the way that they're playing basketball, sure, that might be something that we have to look at, and he can be a late add. But right now, I think they get one guy in that's deserving. But I also think Sabonis has the numbers, but where this team is sitting, that doesn't translate to getting 2 guys in the All-Star Weekend. Instead, you'll see other teams that's, Oklahoma City or Houston, one of those teams, you'll see them get an opportunity to have 1 or 2 guys in. And because of the numbers game, it doesn't look like Sacramento's going to be able to get 2 guys into this conversation.
Not this time. Not this time. We'll stay in the area because the Warriors are having some issues.